So I just got back from a quick trip to Calgary, did a bunch of record shopping while I was there. Thought it'd be a fun opportunity to kind of take you along, show you some of the pickups I grabbed. Ended up getting a couple of my Grails, knocked off a bunch of really cool audiophile records I got some really good deals on, and filled in a number of holes in my collection. Overall, very, very good trip. Lots of good hunting, so I'd like to take you along for the journey, so let's go. So Calgary in Alberta, Canada, excellent place, very underrated for record shopping. I used to live one province over, and I'd go to Calgary a few times a year, usually for like concerts, visit friends, whatever, but I would save up money for like months leading up to those trips, knowing that I'd be bringing back like a huge stack of records. Usually when I go there, I'd bring like one of those like record tote bags, and I'd bring like usually at least 20 to 30 records back every time, because for like $200 I could get like 5 times as many records as I could get from my hometown. Always great selection, tons of new stuff that was never available where I was from, and really good prices. So it's always exciting when I go back there, and I have a number of stores that I frequent. I ended up going to I think 5 or 6 different stores, bought stuff from 3 of them, and ended up grabbing 10 records in total. The first store I went to was the Record Center. I think that they tout themselves as being like the oldest record store in Canada, the biggest record store in Canada. I don't know what it is, but something that makes them a little bit unique is that they have this huge room that is just like stacked to the, like from floor to ceiling, with shelves that have records that are kind of placed like you would just like in like a normal collection, like stacked up. They have them divided by like genre, by era, and then they have them like A to Z. But it's kind of difficult to navigate. You have to get onto like milk cartons to kind of grab the records you're looking for. It's kind of a hassle to get around. It's a little bit overwhelming. A place that you can spend hours and hours in and not find what you're looking for. But staff's super helpful. If you need anything, they'll kind of direct you along the way. But I noticed that the prices have gone up there quite a bit since the last time I was there. They have a very odd new arrival section that, again, it is you're kind of picking through the records. That historically I was able to get a lot of good deals and some cool stuff from there, but I noticed that pretty much any record that was of note or had some sort of name was automatically $30. So it was like Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, $30. Led Zeppelin 4, $30. The shocking one to me was that that Wham record that you see everywhere for like $5 to $8. I think that record's increased in popularity with like a younger crowd, but yeah, it was $30, and I was like, okay, it's a little rich for my budget. Maybe I'm not going to be getting the huge haul that I used to get. But I spent some time there. I spent an hour or so there, dug through the bins. I ended up getting a couple of really cool finds. The first one that I grabbed was this Captain Beyond record. This is Sufficiently Breathless. This is their second album, I believe. This was a hard rock, stoner rock supergroup from the 70s. It had members of Iron Butterfly and Deep Purple. Very influential, and people who love heavy music have gone back and rediscovered this band. Love it. Their third album, which is not that good, is super common, but their first 2 albums, which are great, are actually quite hard to find. So I was very excited to find this copy for only $20. Gave it a spin. Just awesome, like proto-metal, hard rock. If you're into anything like that and you haven't heard these guys, check it out. Excellent stuff. Really great to finally get in my collection after years and years of kind of like passively looking for this one. Overall, I only ended up getting 2 records from this store. I used to usually get like 7 or 8 when I would go, but oh well, I still had fun checking things out. But a record that I found that was just so unusual I had to grab. It's a copy of the Beach Boys' Love You, but it's not normal pressing. It's a New Zealand pressing. It said import on it. It's got this super flimsy like jacket. The vinyl looks completely unplayed. This is kind of a weird album, very divisive within Beach Boys fans. It's their quote-unquote punk or new wave record. Lots of synthesizers, but very simple, like Brian Wilson type songs. I think he wrote all the songs on the album, but I really dug it, and it sounds fantastic. So that was a good pickup, and I'm happy that I took a chance and grabbed this one. Just down the street from RecordLand, there's another store that I've come to love, and it's called That Old Retro Store, and they sell hi-fi equipment, but also records. They have 2 floors. In their basement, they have just like tons and tons of like shelves full of records to dig through. You can spend hours there. I unfortunately didn't have a ton of time, so I just sticked upstairs where they have kind of a more sorted selection. They sell their new records there. They sell more, I guess, desirable used records, but prices are always really good there, and I ended up getting a couple of awesome titles I was very excited about. So the first record I grabbed there was this copy of the Grateful Dead's American Beauty. I paid $30 for this, which I know is not like the best price, but for a vintage copy of a well-known Grateful Dead album, I thought that this wasn't too bad. I was way late getting into this band. I think they're one of those groups that I always assumed was terrible because people said bad things about them. I don't know how many times my dad made the joke that, what does the Deadhead say when they run out of acid? It's like, oh, this band sucks. But even if you really think that you're going to hate the Grateful Dead, Working Man's Dead, American Beauty, and Live Dead, just awesome folk rock, country rock albums. If you're into like late 60s, early 70s rock, these are amazing. And so I took a chance on this one, knowing that the price wasn't necessarily super cheap. However, turns out this is actually a first Canadian pressing. It's on this like green Warner Brothers label, Deep Groove. This thing sounds killer. This is such an amazing sounding record. A while back I did this video about Canadian pressings of albums that actually sound really good, because Canadian pressings often are vastly inferior to US or UK pressings. But holy crap, this thing just sounded huge, great soundstage. The vinyl itself was in way better condition than it looked. It had a lot of scuffs, but nothing that affected play. Dynamite record. I'm going to keep an eye out for early pressings of the other Grateful Dead records, because this thing completely blew me away. The other record that I grabbed from there, one that I actually I don't think I'd even heard about this album till last year when Mobile Fidelity reissued it, but people were going nuts about this album, saying like how good it was, how good it sounded. The full album isn't actually available on Spotify, so I'd never even listened to the whole thing, but the songs that I'd heard, I really liked. But this is David Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name. So what makes this album unique is that this was done with a ton of collaborators, a lot of the top names from the San Francisco music scene around like the 60s. So all the members of the Grateful Dead play on this, members of Jefferson Airplane, the Santana Band, Joni Mitchell, Graham Nash, Neil Young, just complete all-star crew. But again, I think this is the first Canadian pressing. Killer sounding, way better than I expected. I think this is one of those records where just like it was recorded and mastered so well that really any pressing of it sounds great. Awesome freak folk kind of country rock. If you're into like, Neil Young, any of that like San Francisco sound, and you still haven't heard this, keep an eye out for a copy of this. I haven't really ever seen a copy of this since I've been looking for it, so $20. I don't know how good of a price that is, but I was excited to pay that, and I would highly recommend this to any rock fan or any fan of just like really good sounding records where the music's also really good too. So I ended up going to a few other record stores. I didn't buy much at any of them. There's two record stores that I always go to. They're on 17th Avenue. One's called Sloth Records. I checked it out. I didn't actually end up buying anything. They have a great selection though. Really like that store. They actually were having concerts there for the week. There was this music festival, Sled Island, going on, kind of one of those festivals that kind of takes over an entire like downtown, where every like concert venue, bar, coffee shop, restaurant, arcade bar, record store are all showing how have concerts going on. So that was kind of cool, and there was a really nice vibe. Saw a lot of people really excited going out buying records. So that was kind of cool. But down the street from there is this store that I always seem to just score and buy a ton of stuff at. It's called Blackbyrd Myoozik. I know that they have a location in Edmonton as well, but the Calgary spot, it's you go downstairs, it's in like kind of this like old house building that has like a bunch of different businesses in it. Smaller store, but super curated. They get in a lot of cool stuff that you don't normally see. Lots of like Light in the Attic releases, lots of like Japanese records, some audiophile stuff that is not common in a lot of Canadian stores. Really cool jazz selection, and then pretty much everything else that you would expect to see at like a bigger record store, but it's in this very small place. And this is where I got the bulk of my records. So one thing that I always make a joke about is that whenever you're in a city that isn't your hometown and you go to a record store and they have like a bin of like discount or like records that they're trying to get rid of, especially like new records, take a look through it. Like, if it's in your hometown, you're never going to find anything you want. But for some reason, whenever I do this in cities that aren't my own, I always find something that's awesome. So I was going through and I found some actually pretty cool stuff by some local artists that I recognize that I decided not to grab. But I found one record that I've actually had on my wanted list for a long time. I just haven't picked up. But this is the Weather Stations self-titled album. Weather Stations, this incredible like indie folk country singer-songwriter. She's absolutely amazing. I'm going to see her next week, so this is awesome to pick up in advance of that show. This is one of the few albums of hers I actually don't own, but I hadn't listened to this album in a couple of years, and it just blew me away. It sounds so fantastic. You often will see her songs on like Audiophile or like songs to test your like headphones with type of like playlists on like Spotify. Amazing stuff. If you're a fan of like, yeah, any of those like Grateful Dead or like that, like David Crosby, those like early 70s like folk songs with like kind of a more like alternative like modern flair to them, really well recorded. One of my problems that I've had though is that none of the albums of hers that I own sound very good on vinyl, but this one just sounded incredible. It just blew me away, the soundstage and just like how good her voice sounded. Sounded like any like kind of like audiophile like female vocal record. Stunning stuff, and yeah, it was only $10, marked down from 25. They had a bunch of them, so if you're in Calgary, run to Blackbyrd and grab one of these. Such a good deal, and even if you're not, just go stream this album, it rules. Her other albums are awesome too. One that I grabbed just to fill a hole in my collection that I didn't realize until recently I had, but grabbed a copy of Talking Heads, More Songs About Buildings and Food. Pretty sure I lied in a video once and said, I own every Talking Heads record. Apparently I didn't. Did not own a copy of this one. As evidence when I went to go play it, and turned out I in fact did not own it, so that was on my bad, but I own a copy now, and this is a Canadian pressing, and I don't know what the deal is, but like the Canadian pressings of Talking Heads records all sound incredible. Everyone that I have sounds amazing, and this one's no different. Only $15, which like for Talking Heads records and really a lot of like new wave or like post-punk records, so many people are getting into the genre and discovering all these bands that used to be a bit obscure, but I mean the Talking Heads are quite popular. So $15 to fill in a hole in my collection. Absolutely awesome stuff. Sounds awesome as well. And the rest of the haul is what got me really excited. I was able to knock off one of my Grails. I also got some records I've been looking for a while, and some really good deals on audiophile stuff. So the first record that I picked up, I was going through the used section, and I found this in the new arrivals, but this is the Tone Poet of McCoy Tyner's Time for Tyner. And I was like, wait a minute, I think that was just put out like a few weeks ago, and it turns out it was put out at the beginning of June. It was only $20, which I mean, Tone Poets in Canada are usually $40 to $45. My best guess is someone returned this. I was reading notes on Discogs. A lot of people were not happy with this album, but I think it's just because it was recorded a little bit different than most of the albums that are on the Tone Poet series. This album's kind of confusing because it's listed as saying that it was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder in Hackensack, but on the back there's this whole essay about them playing at this like John Coltrane memorial concert, and the recording itself sounds live. So I assume that this was a live record. The sound stage is a lot different than what you would get from a standard jazz recording, like an audiophile recording, but it still sounds amazing, and the music on this is fantastic. This is probably my favorite McCoy Tyner album I've heard so far. If you are expecting it to not be, you know, the pristine, like, okay, drums on the left, bass players on the right, piano's like center right kind of thing, and you're kind of expecting the sound to be a bit more muddled, kind of more mono-ish, this is a killer record. Definitely one of the best Tone Poets I've heard in a long time. One of my issues with the Tone Poets is they often do tons of records that are all very similar. This one to me is quite different. It's got a kind of a quirky lineup, vibraphone, piano, bass, and drums. So there's no horns on this thing. Gives it kind of a laid back, more atmospheric feel. Loved it. Super happy to have it. Only $20 for a Tone Poet. Like, you can't go wrong. Next is an album that has been getting a lot of chatter recently because it's been released as part of the new original jazz classic series, but I found an old copy of the same title, an original jazz classic of Working with the Miles Davis Quintet. Mono copy. This was only $20, where the OJC, the new one, is like $45. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take the risk, see how this sounds. I believe this was also pressed at RTI like the new OJCs are. And this sounds amazing. I mean, I'm no like connoisseur of mono recordings, but for me, this is one of the better mono records that I've heard. So I saved $25, got the music, which is awesome, and got a killer title. So, I mean, I would highly recommend just searching out the old OJC instead of buying the new one and, you know, wasting your money. I'm sure that one sounds fantastic too, but honestly, no complaints on my end. And, you know, ignorance is bliss sometimes, and to me this sounds great, and you can't tell me otherwise unless eventually I do pick up the new OJC one. A record that has just completely eluded me for years because every time I find a copy of it, I end up looking it up and finding a lot of people saying that it sounds bad, but I finally got a good sounding copy of Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Jazz to Come. Must own for any jazz collection, must own for any record collection, really. One of the most important albums ever made. Every time I find this, I look it up and people say, oh, that copy sounds bad, that copy's terrible, search for this copy instead. This is the Rhino reissue. I'm not sure what year it was done, but it was cut by Bernie Grundman. I admittedly haven't given this a full detailed listen yet, but I listened to it while I was doing dishes in the other room. But the couple times I popped into the living room in front of the hi-fi, when I was able to like focus on it, it sounded fantastic. It sounded like any other awesome audiophile jazz record. Play this one while probably my girlfriend's out of the house, so I don't have to subject her to an Ornette Coleman record, but I'll really dive in and enjoy this one because this is a great record, and so far it's so good, sounds great. And the last record I picked up, one that I have been wanting for years and years and years, Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, the Mobile Fidelity edition. So this was repressed, I believe, last year, and these were going for like $200-300, and my understanding was that this is the best sounding version ever. This is my all-time favorite jazz record. I have a Canadian first pressing. It sounds terrible. I've been holding out for a great version of it for so long, and I was really, really excited when this got repressed, but shipping, exchange is going to be a lot of money to get this shipped to Canada. I went to a local store that carries MoFi records. I ordered it from them, and it just never arrived. They kept getting in different MoFi titles. They kept getting in MoFi Miles Davis titles, but this one just did not arrive for some reason. And something that's cool about Calgary is tax is way cheaper than it is where I live. So, for example, the $35 worth of records I bought at RecordLand ended up being $36.50. So any opportunity to save a few bucks is appreciated. This record was quite expensive though, still about $90. I think I'm probably going to do a more detailed like shootout between the two copies I have just to like really go through this. I listened to the first side and it was worth every penny. So good. So happy to finally have this. I can't wait to dive in and just like hear things on this album that I've never heard before because I've been so disappointed by the vinyl copy that I had. But killer stuff. So excited that Blackbyrd had this. I grabbed it the second I saw it, and I think it's out of print again, so I think it's gone up in value, so I could flip it if I really want to. I don't want to though, but very happy to have this in my collection. So overall, a great trip. Got a really nice haul, some really good record stores. If you've never thought about going to Calgary to go to record stores, highly recommended. Great deals, low tax, Canadian dollars not super strong, so yeah, maybe make that your next destination like I did. But thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.